I want to go over another concept on something, and I'm probably going to keep this video nice and short because sometimes I go too long, and I don't know. But there's a lot to say sometimes, you know. Then I want to get the point through. Sometimes I say it a few times, but anyway, I want to get on to something here about, really, I know a lot of people say the US dollar is 100% fiat. In a way, that's true. In another way, it's not true. If I had a piece of paper here or something like that, and I'd said, this is a dollar, and, I had the power, the military power to say, you're going to use this as legal tender, well, guess what? It's not the paper that's the strength. It's actually backed by something substantial and real, and it's actually our U.S. military is what kind of makes the dollar, in many ways, not exactly a fiat currency. Yeah, that's really the reality of it, whether you think that's evil or not, but that's really the reality of it. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, but it's really backed by the full faith of and power, military power of the Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard, and everything else out there, right? And the Navy. So, that's really why it's powerful. That's, it's a piece of paper and it's an electron, but it's backed by something that's powerful too. And, what happened, like a lot of times, well, actually, when Nixon, went off the gold standard, he was forced to go off the gold standard because, de Gaulle, France and de Gaulle was taking back all the gold, and they would have emptied out all their vaults, so they went off the gold standard, and they came up with basically the oil standard, So in effect, the dollar is backed by something. That's why we went to war with Saddam Hussein. He switched to euros to trade oil with, and that's why we went to war with Libya, because he was going to come out with a gold-backed North African currency. Now the next one on the radar is Iran, but it's like too difficult of a country to topple. But maybe it's not going to be necessary because Australia looks like they got a lot more oil than Iran it does with this Arkarango Basin, this new discovery they found. It's got 60 times the amount of known reserves that Australia thought they had. They got 60 times more. 60 times more. It's way bigger than anything in the United States, and the Bakken Reserve, the Liberty Rig, the North Shore. It's way bigger than that. Many times bigger than all that stuff. So, what the hell, what does that mean for, Iran? But, if the dollar actually starts to fall because of the huge debt of the United States, there's one thing I do agree. This guy, Lindsey Williams, I have to actually backtrack. It's not him giving out the information. I know he's getting it from somebody else. But you have to remember, when I comment on Lindsey Williams, or anything, I know a lot of people I think he's snake oil all the way too, but disinformation is a combination of mainly accurate information with some wingers in there. That's the whole idea. You don't put all lies out there because nobody will bite. Understand? That's what misinformation, disinformation's about. Its majority's true, and there's some garbage in it to target people, basically. So that's what's coming out from this elite guy that Lindsey Williams talks to. This elite guy is full of it. But some of the information he's given is correct. If there actually is if the government's going to run into a problem eventually where they're not going to be able to sustain a debt, well, they'll just default on it. Big deal, right? It's like you went out and you said, I just borrowed $50 million for this big project, and then you decided to default on it. And you kept all the goods. You kept everything, from the bank loan and everything, and you said you defaulted. Actually, the only way the United States is going to run into a problem is if it runs into a problem militarily. That's where it's going to run into a problem. If there's actually some type of conflict someplace that weakens the military or does something in some way like that, that's where there's going to be a major, major problem with the United States. Otherwise, um, you know, now obviously I'm in the camp where I know you should be keeping silver, because what may happen is if they default on a debt, we might have a currency crisis and all this kind of stuff. And that's why you'd want to keep silver. Yeah, I know that. I know that. But as far as the United States just, and you know, who's going to get raped by that is going to be the middle class, the people that don't have silver. But as far as the United States actually going down and, you know, collapsing completely and all this kind of crap, maybe not, maybe not. I know there's a lot of doom and gloomers out there who think that's going to happen, but it may or may not happen. I don't know. It would have to, if it does happen, it's going to be because something happened with the military. And if you look at all these other countries in the past that had problems, you know, even in Germany when they had the Weimar Republic, it really, the hyperinflation they got that came about at that time was because they lost World War One, right? And you know, basically even that happened with Hungary too. That was even worse than the you know, after World War II, because governments collapsed. Our government may not collapse the way people think. We're probably going to have a reset in our currency, but it may not collapse. So, you know, but for now, the dollar in itself is still backed up by the U.S. military, and it's backed by oil. So, but I think we're not going to have like a collapse of the dollar like that happened in a lot of other places. It, you know, if it does, you're going to have some warning, because the warning's going to be about the problems with geopolitical events. You know, if there's something going on in the Middle East and something unexpected happens bad to the military, oh, that could freaking destroy the markets pretty bad, because it's like all psychological, believe me. Markets are psychological. It's like, you know, if you believe the outlook is good, they go up. You know, it's like Bitcoins right now. Bitcoins is going up over 300 right now. You know, it's looking like dangerous, and it just goes up some more, but I don't know. Now that is something that truly is highly speculative and purely fiat. Bitcoins. It's actually worse than the stock ticker. You know, if you have a stock ticker and it goes up and down, you know, you actually have a company behind it actually making stuff or that people need. But Bitcoins is 100% speculative bet. 100%. There's absolutely nothing intrinsic backing it up other than the faith of the buyers. Not the full faith and back of the U.S. government, full faith and credit of the U.S. government backed by the U.S. military. Bitcoin's got nothing backing it up. You know, I mean, it'd be cool if you bought it for $1 and you sold it for 300. That'd be cool, but I would not buy that right now, man. Wow. But as far as the fiat dollar, in a way, it's not exactly fiat. It's not exactly fiat in a true sense, because it is backed by oil, and the reason it's backed by oil is because most countries in the world trade oil, buy oil, and trade oil in U.S. dollars, and that is backed by the U.S. military. So it's not totally fiat. It's not totally fiat. But obviously, the game is going to be up at some point in time, because I could tell you, it's pretty obvious to me that the elite are going to default on a debt. I know that was one of Lindsey Williams' things he heard from the elite guy, but I ain't going by what he says. I can tell you, I think that's one of the things the elite guys telling him that's solid, and other things are disinformation. I think that's one thing that he's being told that is solid. And when they do default on a debt, there's going to be a currency crisis. Now, I don't know about the dollar going to 1% of its worth, but maybe it can go to half. That would be a hell of a hit too. That would be a crisis. That would be bad news. And that would be plenty bad enough for most Americans, believe me. So if you have silver, you know, I think what's going to happen when that gets up into the bubble mania like Bitcoins, it's going to take a life of its own. So like when you see things going hyperbolic, it's anybody's guess how high the bubble can go, because you can always surprise the hell out of people how high it could go up. But, if you could actually buy a new car for a roll of silver coins or something like that, it gets that crazy. I would be like getting rid of the freaking silver. Well, in my case, I wouldn't buy a new car. I'd probably go look around for 1950 Mercury lowered or something like that. It ran off of hemp diesel conversion or something. And, a couple rolls of silver coins, I'd get something like that. I would never buy a new car. But anyway, that's just my style. I hate these new cars. They're plastic garbage. But anyway, that would be your indication. That would be your indication. Because, although silver has intrinsic wealth, it starts getting that damn lopsided that you could buy, like, a house for, I don't know, like a couple hundred ounces of silver or something like that, and a pretty good house. Something's wrong there, because the house contains materials and labor and all this other type of stuff. So something's going on there. That's when silver would be getting highly speculative, big time. Right now, it's not speculative now at all. I don't think it's going to go down to single digits. I could be wrong, but the mines would really close then for sure. And you have to remember this. If silver ever went down to single digits, you should expect, everything to drop too, commodity-wise. What you mean? Your gasoline prices should be, $1.30 a gallon for gasoline. A loaf of bread should be under $1. That type of stuff. You know what I mean? So, like I always said, commodities, although they're not all linked together one-to-one and have these perfect ratio, they all move in unison. And generally speaking, they kind of do. In a general way. So you're not going to see, if we get $9, if it ever came to be so, I don't think it's going that way though. It's a crazy thing to think right now, but if it went, I think it's just going to sit flat and then it's going to take off hyperbolic and people are going to get scared about it going too high again, and we're going to have a couple fake outs. But you just have to remember that, when you sell silver, you're going to take fiat cash, but our US dollar is not total fiat. Now, if there's a problem where the US military has a major problem somehow, I don't know how they would, but say they did, that would give you rise to, there's going to be a major collapse somehow. Because if you look at countries that really collapsed, it's because they didn't have the strength to defend themselves, or they lost a war or something like that. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case with the U.S. for, from what I could tell. You know what I mean? I think the U.S. has a lot of hidden military technology out there, despite, I think the only country that can actually give the U.S. a major problem would be Russia. And I think there's a lot of hardliners behind the scenes that are looking for an opportunity to do that, as they always have. But, it's in lieu of that, no, even though the dollar is a paper instrument, it's electronic, it's still backed by something substantial. It may not be gold, it's still backed by not just the full faith and credit of the debtor U.S. government, but it's backed by oil, and it's backed by the U.S. military. And if the government has a load of debt, they're going to default on it. And actually, most of the debt is held domestically. It's not held by China and Japan. It's held domestically. So we'd have a major financial crisis domestically. So if the U.S. government defaulted on a debt, major financial institutions would cave in domestically. Domestically. A lot of people don't realize that too. And that is where some of that stuff where Lindsey Williams talks about paper instruments not being trustworthy, that's where that could very well be correct. But paper instruments in, say, a company that produces concrete or something like that, and there's a demand for concrete, and you're saying it's a share in that company, that type of paper instrument's not going to go down. It may be like the insurance industry and the banking industry that's going to have the problem. That's where it'll be really if the government defaults, where there's they're going to default. But you could see right now coming up, they're not going to default over the next 6 months. You almost know that for a fact. They're not going to default over the next year. That you would know. You'd have to see interest rates rising first. And it's not going to happen immediately. But it's not too far off. But if they default, it's just going to rape the middle class. It's not going to actually kill the United States. It's just going to rape the middle class all the way. So, if you got silver and you see dollars going way to hell up on silver later on, don't be afraid to buy some big ticket items that you can get a deal on. Don't be afraid of it. The fiat money is not going to go to oblivion that fast. Unless there's a problem with the military. That's the difference.